My name is Amy Weber. I am joined by Jennifer Volpe, and together we are the co founders of Speak, Learn, and Play. It is a multidisciplinary therapeutic practice, pediatric practice in Brooklyn. And today we are going to be talking about the link between anxiety disorders and communication disorders. This is a topic that Jen and I are very excited about. We feel very passionately about this. This is something that the two of us discuss almost every single day at work. So we are excited to be able to discuss it with you as well. So I will turn it over to you, Jen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Volpe. I am a speech language pathologist here at Speak, Learn, and Play. And yeah, Amy is so right. We talk about this all the time. We've often had kids come in our office where we're unsure of where they should start. Should they start with some speech therapy or should they start with some counseling or do they need both? Is anxiety the main cause or is there a communication disorder that is the main cause? So I'm actually going to share with you. You should have these in your handout. What pieces can lead to anxiety? So the first thing I want to say is that, in prepping for this webinar, and I kind of looked through the research, one of the things that I was really sort of shocked to learn, even though I see it in my own practice, is that, kids who have been diagnosed with a developmental language disorder, which is sort of a fancy way for saying receptive expressive delays or disorder, they are 6 times more likely to experience anxiety than some of their neurotypical peers. And in addition to sort of this CLD, we see a lot of anxiety in kids with ASD. We see a lot of anxiety also with ADHD. So there are other disorders, but I was really surprised about how how much more likely the two are to co-occur. And then the question became why? Why do they happen? So, one of the things, and you'll see is the first one, is the slow processing speed. And that really means that, kids are kind of like a little bit a step behind, right? Conversations are moving really quickly. A classroom instructions are moving really quickly. And because you're not getting it as fast, it can cause confusion and fear, leading to anxiety, not knowing what's going on. Can I advocate for myself? Am I doing this right? It can be really, unsettling for kids. I kind of think about it in a way to make it kind of easier is, if you've gone to a foreign country where you sort of know the language and you can get it if you really listen, but, you're in a place where like you need to actually figure out what you're doing, like in a train station and that sort of is unsettling, right? That you have to really think about things and really process them before you can respond. I mean, some of our kids, that is kind of their experience all the time. Same thing with communication delays. Kids are having a hard time getting what they want, what they need. Sometimes you'll see you see it a lot in little kids as they're developing language, right? They don't have it all. So that's why you see the tantrums and, the hitting and the biting that's kind of common or developmentally appropriate in young kids. But for kids with communication delays, sometimes those behaviors sort of continue. Tantrums, we might also see it as avoidance, and all of those things, right, can make a kid more anxious. Again, reading and writing disorders, difficulty completing all your assignments, knowing that, you understand the information, but you're unable to access it. What is that going to be like at school? Or kids looking at me differently? Am I ever going to get this? What is wrong with me? Right. And that's a poor self-esteem part, which again will also lead to anxiety. And then it becomes like this sort of circle, right? The more anxiety you have, the harder it is to communicate. And the harder it is to communicate, the more anxiety there is. And then the same thing happens with pragmatic language delays. Pragmatic language refers to the way in which we use language for our social world, and this is the one where we see a lot, with kids with ADHD. It's, they are having trouble following the conversation because they're either focused on it and then they can't connect to peers. And then all of a sudden they're kind of in a place where they don't really have a lot of friends. And then again, that cycle leads to social anxiety. And then social anxiety makes it a lot harder to go out and talk to people and communicate. So, these two areas, at least in what we've seen in our practice, really sort of feed into it. And then, but So as parents, what can you do about it? As professionals, we treat our kids as, clinically for all of these communication disorders, and that will eventually alleviate some of it. But it takes time. And in the meantime, it's what can you do? And, all of this is in your handout. There are some tips about, you know, like reducing brain pressure. If you know that your child has difficulty formulating their language, make sure that you're giving them enough time to be able to get their ideas out. And the more that they can use that time to get their ideas out, the easier it will become. Make sure that, it's hard, especially if you have family, if you have multiple children, there's a lot of competition for speaking and getting things. If you know that one of your children sort of has one of these things, to keep that in mind and make sure and ask them directly if they need anything to make sure that their voice is also getting heard. The same thing, asking pointed questions about their day. The worst thing you can do for a kid with a communication delay, I mean, and neurotypical kids do this too. What'd you do today? It's just way too broad. It's too much to go back and process and organize and tell you. So a lot of times I'll ask my son, what's one fun thing you did today? What's one not so fun thing today? Tell me who you played with today. And then you can kind of ask more specific questions, which will take away some of that, like, oh my God, I have to think about everything I did this day. Well, I did this, but I don't know if I want to talk about that. I mean, that's not the internal dialogue, but I think a lot of kids freeze, and that's why you get nothing. It's okay. Nothing. Previewing anything that's new that you're going to do. We do this in the office. Amy runs a camp and they send a social story for camp. I will send social stories to kids who are, coming to speech for the first time. And if you're unfamiliar, a social story is just kind of like a guide of, for speech, it's going to be like, what does the building look like? How are you going to get to the office? There are pictures of the space. There are pictures of me or the therapist that they're going to be working with. And so that will sort of alleviate some of the anxiety, but also, help kids, if the anxiety is less, they can talk about it more, right? They can communicate more. And then at home, board games that require kids to communicate, like categories, headbands, gnomes at night, any one of those that just kind of gets kids practicing is a way to support a lot of these areas, and it will support the work that they are doing in therapy. So that is my sort of spiel. I will turn it over to Amy, who will now talk about the opposite of how anxiety can sort of lead to some of these other communication disorders, or not disorders, but, difficulties. Off to you, Amy. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen if I can figure it out. Oh my gosh, here we go. Sorry. Even after all this time, I'm still not a master of Zoom. All right.
Yeah, I feel like I need a Zoom tutorial. I was good at it for a little while and now I'm a mess. Hello. My name is Amy Weber. As I said at the beginning, I am a licensed clinical social worker and I specialize in work with children and their parents around an assortment of issues and needs, including some learning disabilities, some anxiety disorders, ASD, ADHD, all kinds of things. So I want to start by thinking about where anxiety comes from. And I learned this fact last year, and it is the most interesting fact that I learned all of last year. Our brains scan for safety constantly. The average is 4 times every second. Our brains are scanning our environment. We're scanning our internal states and we're scanning our relationships, and our brains are constantly asking, am I safe? Am I not safe? Am I safe? Am I not safe? If the information that we receive is mostly safe, then we can rest into what I call connection mode or thinking, your thinking brain. But if the information you receive is mostly not safe, then we shift into protection mode. And anxiety is part of protection mode. Our brains are saying that something is not safe. And that, again, might be our own internal experience that's making us feel uneasy. It might be something between in the relationship that's, between the two people that's making us feel uneasy, or something in our environment. So, what does anxiety look like in kids? It looks like difficulty concentrating, trouble sleeping, poor eating, frequent angry outbursts, constant worrying, and feeling really tense and kind of fidgety, among many, many other symptoms. For many kids, anxiety also impacts their communication. We might see kids who talk too much. They might have trouble organizing their thoughts. They might shut down. They might not be able to regulate their breath to get a full sentence out. They might speak really, really fast, or they might slow their speech way down. And their speech might be slurred or jumbled in a way that makes it really hard to understand them. So, what can we do about that? The first, and this is all part of your handout also, but anxiety is contagious. It brings up all sorts of feelings in us as the adults. It might remind us of our own feelings of rejection or loneliness if your child is having trouble connecting to friends. It might be really hard for us to hear that our child's reading level is several steps behind, and they're feeling self-conscious about that, or that they're having a hard time getting their needs met in the classroom, or that they're several steps behind in terms of the directions that are being given out in the classroom. um it's it can also sometimes kids will come in with anxiety, and it's like, well, this feels like a very small problem. It can be very frustrating to us as adults to hear, like, really your shoe wasn't tied quite right, and that led to this big giant meltdown. Um all of these feelings are valid. Our own feelings of frustration, of fear of our kid being rejected, of whatever is going on, of our own anxiety. All of those feelings are valid. And if we approach an anxious child when we're feeling really anxious or dysregulated, we're going to make their anxiety worse. Um, so we have to notice our own feelings, acknowledge that they're real and valid, and then take a big, deep breath, or shake out your hands and your shoulders, or, physically release that anxiety before you approach your child to try to soothe them. Um, when you approach the child, you want to label the feeling and empathize. It might be challenging to understand the full story, but take whatever you can get, whatever little glimmers you have, and just stick with labeling those feelings. Avoid asking too many questions, because a child who's already activated and anxious is going to have a really hard time formulating the answers to try to explain themselves more. So you will get some more details when they're more regulated, but I would really, for the moment, just, wow, that sounds really scary. That sounds so frustrating. That sounds disappointing. Whatever feeling you can kind of grab onto outside of, from whatever jumbled story they've told you, you want to just label that feeling, and they'll let you know if you're right or wrong. That kids are very good at that. So after you've labeled the feeling and you've empathized, you want to soothe through the feelings. And this is really, really hard, because we are human beings and we want our kids to feel better, and we want to move on with our lives. And then maybe there's a bus to catch, or maybe there's, we've got to get to school because we cannot be late again for this 15th time this month. Um, it's hard to sit with those really big feelings when kids are really dysregulated and they're melting down. It is really hard to just sit there and be there with those feelings, but you will get much further the longer you can tolerate the feelings and soothe your child through them. So what does that look like? it might look like a big hug. It might look like some rocking. It might look like snuggling on the couch. It might look like offering them a snack or a drink of water. Anything that your child will find soothing in that moment will move them through the feeling faster than if you start to rush them. That's going to increase their anxiety. And the last tip that I have is a little tricky because we want to respect the feelings. We want to respect the anger and the disappointment and the sadness and the worry and the fear, but we also don't want to empower it. And there's a difference between making sure your child has the scaffolding and the support that they need and making accommodations to address to avoid the stressful situations or anxious feelings. So that might look like, if you're avoiding, it might look like skipping school, avoiding reading and writing, not going to math class, refusing play dates. We really want to communicate to kids that we know that this is hard for them and that it's scary, and you know that we're going to get through it together. I think that's my biggest tip, is to really kind of walk the line between really figuring out how you can best scaffold and give lots of support and give more skills to support the skills that need to be done, or the tasks that need to be done, as opposed to, okay, you don't want to read, we're just not going to read. We're not going to do math class. We're not going to go to that birthday party. We're not going to go to science. Whatever it is that they're trying to avoid. So thank you very, very much. And we will now open it up to questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Rebecca, and I really appreciated the talk. This is really helpful. My son actually went to do, I think, some group play at Speak, Learn, and Play when he was much younger, and it was wonderful. It was really
Oh,
beneficial. Now I find that, we're in adolescence, a very different period of time. And, he's so successful academically and in so many ways. But, adolescence brings a whole new generation, a whole new experience of anxiety. And I guess I'm just curious about your thoughts on this age, high school and a lot of these like disorders, like speech disorders, or he has autism, it doesn't go away. It's there. It's part of who he is, but it does, I guess I'm just, interested in hearing more tips or thoughts or resources for helping him manage anxiety.
that's such a good question and so important, because kids with anxiety disorders, it doesn't necessarily go away, and they do learn some coping skills, and then others kind of lag behind. So I think, to me, I start by taking a really good look at what are the lagging skills here. What does this child really need to work on to be successful? Because he's not doing it on purpose. He's Oh, sorry, Jen's computer is and her headphones, and so we do need to support kids in developing some coping strategies so that they can get through some of these tougher moments. So one of the things that I find, especially for kids on the spectrum who also have anxiety, is there's a lot of anxiety. I mean, they don't really have play dates anymore, but there's a lot of social anxiety. And there's a lot assumed of being more independent, of being able to like hang out with a friend after school and not have to have it run through you and that child's, teen's family. There's a lot less support there, which can be really anxiety provoking for kids, especially kids on the spectrum, if they're struggling with those social cues and clues. So one of the things that I will usually recommend to families is that it doesn't have to be just because other kids are having, independent play dates. It doesn't, your child might not want that. And it's okay. And normalizing that for them. And maybe you can go to a pizza place together, or you can sit at a different table while they're close by so that they feel a little bit more supported and a little less on their own in case something goes awry. I would also keep it short. We always want to end a play date or a social situation on a high note. So I have one ASD teen who goes fishing with a friend from school, which is perfect because you don't talk when you're fishing. You stand next to each other and you fish. They're engaging in an activity that they both love, and it can go on for as long or as short as they're both interested in. So he was lucky enough to find his special interest in a friend who shares that special interest. But I really recommend, there are lots of places that you can go and play video games together. So you're together, but not necessarily having to sit across from each other and have a conversation. It takes some of the pressure of that off. I don't know if you have other suggestions, Jen.
Well, let me fix the computer thing first. Sorry. Of course, my headphones died.
I'll just respond to say thank you. That was so on point. Like the point about not scheduling play dates anymore, and him feeling, I think, a little bit adrift without that scaffolding. Yeah, that's really speaks to my experience, and also, but it's really nice to hear the validation that his experience will be different, and that it's good to keep things short and have a different sort of benchmark of what a successful social experience is. So thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, and I don't have too much to add to that, but I think finding an interest. We had one family who went on their local parenting group and was like, my kid has this interest. I don't remember what it was, and they were looking for like-minded people. I mean, and the kid was on board with that, and that seemed to be successful for a couple of meetups. But yeah, I guess keeping it, like Amy said, being okay with it being different, I think is the best advice or tip. Anyone else?
Anita has her hand up.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for this informative Zoom call. I just wanted to ask you, I personally have a child who has ADHD and also SLP. I'm sorry, more language related issues. So he's a sixth grader. He's doing great, but I know that come seventh, eighth, and high school beyond, things are really going to pick up. And do you have any things that I need to look out for in terms of goals and what have you? Because my ADHD is anxiety, but there's also executive function skills. So what, academically speaking, right? Not just using a planner, but what kind of things or aspects should I be looking out for so that I can strategize accordingly come the middle school from a SLP standpoint?
Sure. So one of the things that changes in middle school, right, is really, and I'm sorry, I missed part of your question because of course my computer is
Oh,
glitching a little bit. So maybe you could give me a little bit more background. I'm so sorry to have to ask you to repeat yourself.
well, what did you hear? Maybe that would
Just
help.
the last part about
Oh,
the
oh,
middle
wow.
school and
Okay.
executive functioning.
So, yeah.
issues.
So to repeat so I have a child personally who is sixth grade, rising seventh grader soon. He, we're working on skills on EF. I do work with an academic coach, but what I'm trying to do, more an executive function coach, but academically, what can I look out for for a child who has ADHD and SLP related issues?
Yep.
What can I look out for academically come seventh, eighth, and high school years? Yeah. I feel like there are a lot coming that I don't know.
Probably. So I think where EF difficulty is, especially in kids with ADHD, shows up mostly academically, is within
Yep.
writing becomes really, really hard. And there's also different types of writing, right? And there's different writing structures. So, writing a narrative or making up a story is very different than being asked to compare and contrast two things in science or in history. So that's where I would put most of my attention, is really just like the writing piece and making sure he understands how to organize his ideas. If you are working with an executive functioning coach, there are different sorts of graphic organizers that for every type of text structure. Do they receive speech at school also?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
We definitely have that done. And also, I was fiercely advocating. He also attended programs at NYU.
Mhm.
But, I know pretty much writing is an issue, right?
Yeah.
And recallability, like, even though, yeah. So, this is my problem. It's like he just wants to get it. I think we're working through, before he was really rushing to get it done, but now we've really just worked on that. That's been a big goal, which is not over. It's still a work in progress. But I guess when you say there's so many graphic organizers, I don't find any really. I've been looking for graphic organizers, and yeah, there's the common hamburger method,
yeah.
and yeah, the figure, but
On that.
I don't really find these graphic organizers that you're discussing. I mean, I also have him utilizing an assistive tech device,
Oh,
right? But we don't know what. Do you have any assistive tech software that helps me with graphic organizers? Like
yeah.
MindUp was one of them, but I'm not sure.
There is one that I liked a lot, and I can't recall the name of it. I will get the name of it for you.
Oh, please, yeah,
Yes, and
yeah.
I'll also email you with some examples of where, graphic organizers that I would use, and I did use when I taught in middle school and high school, and it was
Okay.
there's something called it's now called Writing Revolution. Unless your teachers are trained in it, they probably won't have the organizers, but I can certainly share those type of organizers with you. And it's really about how to structure paragraph writing. It is really what that comes down to. And I know that there are ways to make similar things, the assistive tech. And when I was a speech therapist in the school, like that kind of stuff would fall under my purview, and I would be the one who would be trying to make,
Mhm.
make the graphic organizers for him and make a basic one that he would be able to, utilize on his own. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you can ask your speech therapist to help you with that.
I
Yeah.
have,
Okay.
yeah, I
Okay.
will, but if
Got it.
I feel like, despite all the different avenues of communication, the word of mouth is like really the best way. So and I have an IEP meeting actually next week. So if you have any insight, that would be
All right.
really
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can
Need
also,
my email address
yeah,
or
I think we have your email from the registration. I can also give you some examples of maybe some IEP goals that we've written for
oh
kids.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll give you some examples. No, that's from, and they may have to be adjusted to IEP language a little bit, but
Oh, but even if yeah.
what we really want kids to be able to do with that. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. So
Mhm.
you're not alone. And then the other
No.
thing, you were talking about recall. What
Mhm.
I've been teaching my kids in the office to quite a few middle schoolers is like how to not annotate necessarily, but how to find what's the most important information and how to make sure that they, you know, have a place to put it. If it's a post-it note, if they write a one sentence summary, um, so that way they don't have to recall so much. So if they're reading a book or a chapter, they can just look at the one sentence summaries to get
Mhm.
information. It may be a little challenging to get them to use it, but I find that that's a really helpful. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
need this. I got it all in my head, and then you're like,
Oh my God. Echo, echo, echo.
yeah. You're like, well, tell me about it. And then there's like, well, and there's like dead silence.
Right.
Yeah.
And vocabulary too. Speaking of
Yep.
recallability, even though we introduce them to, it's just the ability to recall vocab. vocabulary instead
Yeah.
of leaning towards simple sentence.
Yeah. And the thing
Sure.
also, with the ADHD, it's also being able to attend to that task, right? He
Mhm.
might be able to recall it. He's just not giving himself enough time to allow that process to happen. And you see that with a lot of our ADHD kids, right? And
Got it.
you will need a lot of repetition too to make it a little bit faster and automatic. But you can't do all things at home. So I think you have to take
No.
what is the biggest challenge right now, right? And it sounds like the writing. So
Well, my
oh,
my goal is like to work on this. I have a really good structure in terms of, the teachers and the related providers and me as the being part of the IEP team is, to work on the automicity, like meaning to make sure we're all communicating together and working together so that the progress truly happens.
great.
Yeah. And so and this actually helps what you were just saying, Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And I'll make sure to get that to you by like tomorrow at the latest.
Yeah, definitely. And I love your company name. It's
Oh, thank
it's
you.
so awesome.
Oh, that makes us feel so good. It took not a long time, but
I love it.
a couple of trial and errors, and we were trying to
Uh-huh.
figure out sort of what we all do, right?
Mm.
Amy's a play therapist. She plays
Oh, okay.
therapist. So we do a lot of speaking, and in general, we just want everybody to learn. So,
Yeah, no, this is a nice intro. Thank you.
oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Anyone else? We love answering questions.
I have a question because I'm also a special needs advocate.
Oh, terrific.
I so nothing aside from my son. If no one else has questions, I can. Okay, so you're based in the city. Are you based in New York City?
In Brooklyn. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. So yeah, the public schools, like I think the word dyslexia and dyslexia screening seems to be ready. It's being used quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
However, the special needs teachers and what have you, I don't find that the tools and the armory is there just yet. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And so, under that title, special needs title teacher, I find that, recently there was, the method, the Winston and the Orton Gillingham, sorry, not Gilligan.
Mistake.
Yeah. So none of this is used. So my question to you are these methods like, I feel like only private therapists and programs are doing this. However, why isn't this incorporated into the schools? What exactly is happening? So I feel like you would have a better pulse point than I do. And I find that it would be very beneficial for me to know because dyslexia seems to be a very common
Yes.
thing coming about.
It is also something that I am very passionate about is dyslexia. When I was in a high school, I was working with, 14 and 15-year-olds and they couldn't read. So
Oh
I
my
ended
God.
up getting myself, yeah, it was really, it was tough to see. I ended up getting myself certified in Wilson, believe it or not. And
Okay.
yeah, I ended up starting, and basically we made a class that was programmed into the kids' schedules. And I was really lucky to have an assistant principal and a special ed coordinator that was really on board with this. I'm sure it can't happen in all schools. I think the bigger issue is people are scared of dyslexia. I don't know. They're scared of the label. There's also, when you think about what programs get put into schools, it's what are they buying? I mean, there's a lot of politics that goes into that.
Mm.
Yeah. So yes, Wilson is and Orton Gillen have been around. Not all teachers are trained. They're not mandated. I think
Oh, wow.
it's changing.
Mhm.
When Adams came into office, because he's also dyslexic, that was one of the educational changes he made. That all kids have to have phonics based instruction, and that's what happened. We were in this balanced literacy where kids were having to guess at the letters or guess at the word based on the pictures, and we know that doesn't work for everyone. What works for everyone is phonics. And phonics wasn't being taught. And that changed this year.
Right.
Every single kid every single school has to have a phonics based program. So in our school, they are using, in my son's school, in kindergarten, they're using Foundations, which is Wilson, and it's been going great. And he comes home with it, and it's, and he has, full disclosure, my son also has a speech delay. So I was really concerned about
Oh,
yeah. So I was
that's
really on top of it. He had an IEP. I was making sure the speech therapist was working on phonemic awareness because phonological awareness, because that's what's not taught. If you want to really support kids, right, and learning to read, the schools have to do phonics-based instruction. That's the science of reading. That's what's evidence-based, and that's where it's going. Whether or
Mhm.
not it will stay, I don't know, but the schools have to now use that. It's mandated. So I'm hoping to see less kids who need, you know, dyslexia support, which is
okay.
now, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
But does that answer your question a little bit?
I guess my question to you is, when it comes to dyslexia, because again, I'm not a professional speech therapist like such as yourself. So if, like, as an advocate, what kind of tools can I encourage in an IEP meeting? Phonological awareness is one.
Yeah.
And, as you said, they're not mandated to certify in these two methods, which have been highly effective. So I end up actually referring the parents to outside organizations.
Mhm.
So which is working right now, but
Yeah. But it's expensive. And
yeah.
it's unfair because not everybody can do that for their kid. The
Mhm.
term we use, because you can't put, as you know, as an advocate on IEP, you cannot put any sort of commercial program on an
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So terms that we use are like a multi-sensory or multimodal method. So, you
Oh
know,
yes.
so that's really what is going to get the kids what they need. In that's the language. What
Okay.
and I advocate a lot for, kids to get more sets than, especially in the younger years, and one-on-one sets to sort of, I don't know if that even exists.
It does.
It does.
Absolutely. Yeah.
One-on-one sets, right, for that reading piece, and with a multi-sensory model, right? So then the school can choose whatever multi-sensory model that they use is the one that should be, and it has to be, again, phonics-based, evidence-based. Wilson's a big one. Spire is a big one. And
Mhm.
most of these programs are Orton Gillingham based.
Okay.
FD has a great phonics program.
Which ones?
So the programs that are, it's Wilson,
Fire, Wilson.
Fire, a lot of all of these are Orton Gillingham based. And the other one I really like is Hegarty.
Haggerty.
Yeah,
Haggerty.
that has Hegarty, Hegggerty.
Okay.
They have a really great phonological awareness program, and it's really not that expensive for schools to use. That's a whole other game, but that's what the kids need. That's what kids with dyslexia need. So if your school wants, or any school wants to prevent large numbers of kids having to get neuropsychs and having to leave and sue the school district, the way to do it is making sure that all the kids get phonological awareness skills.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And once again, does anybody else have other questions? Well, thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate it. If you hang up and you think, "Oh, I have this question I should have asked," please don't hesitate to email us. We love emailing and answering questions and helping people in any way we can. So thank you so much for joining us. In July, we are doing a voter's choice. So watch your email boxes and you can vote and tell us what we should talk about this summer. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, everyone.